So, let's dive straight in with the Maltese Falcon. Drew, what's that all about?
Our other film today will give Scott further support for his John Huston's directorial career was largely a free holiday scheme thesis. And indeed, I'll be very disappointed if he doesn't mention it, we at Fuds and Film being fond of nothing so much as a running joke. But for his first film, Huston didn't yet have the pull for such exotic locations as Campania in southern Italy, so he had to make do with a gloomy San Francisco and Hollywood backlots. It is in these environs that the tale of the Maltese Falcon takes place, based on Dashiell Hammett's 1930 novel and a remake of the 1931 film of the same name, proving that there really is nothing new under the Hollywood sun. There was even another film in between those two, almost exactly halfway, of the same story. If you've not heard of the Maltese Falcon, it is of course the ship that made the Kessel run in less than 12 parsecs, and while it may not look like much, she's got it where it counts. Oh, I do appear to have mixed up my notes. In the most obvious and cliched way, but it amused me, so, bite me. The actual Falcon of the title really doesn't look like much though, but it does, or should, have it where it counts, so it's not a totally baseless joke. Utterly unnecessary, as the film clearly explains it within. Introductory text tells us that when Malta was gifted to the Knights Templar by the King of Spain, they sent him tribute in the form of a glorious golden falcon encrusted with jewels. It never reached Spain, but has cropped up now and again throughout history, though currently it is disguised with black enamel to conceal its true value. The many-year pursuit of this treasure by the Fat Man, Caspar Gutman, a spectacular Sydney Greenstreet, inadvertently comes to the door of Humphrey Bogart's private detective Sam Spade in the form of Mary Astor's femme fatale Bridget O'Shaughnessy, who hires Spade and his partner to follow a man she claims is a rotter and doing her sister wrong. Spade's partner is shot. A grief-stricken Spade waits at least 3 or 4 minutes after learning of this before having his name removed from the signage. And when the man his partner was following, and the prime suspect, is murdered shortly afterward, Spade finds himself in trouble with the police, with Bridget now nowhere to be found, and her sister seemingly non-existent. Finding Spade, though, is Peter Lorre's thief-cum enforcer Joel Cairo, and also finding Spade is a whole heap of trouble, and soon Spade is deep in a world of cross and double-cross, untrustworthy women, understanding secretaries, moody shadows and charismatic villains, and, rather pleasingly, very little shooting, our hero preferring to let his mouth do the talking. 1941 saw 2 particularly auspicious and assured directorial debuts, and while Huston's wasn't as impactful as that of one Mr. O. Wells, it was the start of an incredible career, and helped, if not birth, then codify a whole genre. The Maltese Falcon was one of the films to which the Italian-French film critic Nino Frank was referring when, in 1946, he coined the term film noir, and while some earlier films matched the somewhat nebulous definitions, Panorama du film noir américain, one of the defining early texts on the subject, referenced the Maltese Falcon as the first major film noir. There's still an immense amount of craft on show in the Maltese Falcon though, even if it doesn't quite match up to Citizen Kane. Again, what does? Both behind and in front of the camera, and some astonishing performances, like the aforementioned Greenstreet. This was his first film role, and it's a hell of a debut. And of course Bogart, whose cold, hard-edged private eye still manages to hint at past wounds that shaped his character. Impressively too, for an 80-year-old film, it still has the power to surprise. I'd forgotten most of the details, and how refreshing to watch a film and be behind the writer, also Huston once again, and behind the protagonist, instead of a good 15 minutes ahead of them as I often am, and without the need for nonsensical Deus Ex Machina explanations. And the plot isn't even the film's strongest suit, nor its point. The Falcon itself is a MacGuffin. Character is key here, not narrative. Though it does satisfy on that score, unlike the entertaining but labyrinthily scripted The Big Sleep of 5 years later, in which Bogey also played a fedora-wearing hard-boiled PI. And it's tremendously pleasing to discover that the protagonist's motivations are not at all what you expected. Simply, it's excellent and well worth watching if you haven't done so. Get to it.
I don't know, this Sam Spade guy, he's no Philip Marlowe, is he? Well, actually, kind of pretty much is. I'm not sure what to add to that. It is simply terrific. I guess primarily because well, Bogey's just terrific in this, isn't he? Incredibly watchable all the way throughout, which really kind of captured your attention, held it all the way throughout. As you say, really refreshing to not really know where films are going. I'm sure I've seen this before, but like yourself, could not really remember what was going on in it. And it's always nice to see the way that these double crosses and shifting allegiances all kind of ultimately make sense. But when you're watching, you're never quite sure who's on whose side and quite what's going on. So other than no one is quite what they seem, you can't really quite have much of another basis for extrapolating a lot of character on it. So it certainly keeps you guessing, and all the way throughout. Sidney Greenstreet's magnificent in it. And yes, an awful lot to like in here, and not a great deal to dislike. Hell of a showing, you say, both in front of and behind the camera. I guess the one thing I've maybe struggled with throughout all the Huston films we've seen, and it's still a fraction of them, but I don't really feel I got a sense of a John Huston film as like a style. He doesn't have like a lot of recognisable calling card, apart from the fact that he just seems to know how to pick really good narratives, which I obviously appreciate quite a lot. But yeah, he seems to have a knack for picking films where, you know, there's a lot of character work going on, there's a lot of interesting things going on, and I don't know if he's necessarily giving a lot of sort of repeatable visual flair to anything in particular, but what he's doing is creating an incredibly efficiently told narrative that keeps you guessing all the way throughout, and that's in evidence all the way from the start of the Maltese Falcon. So yes, it is a terrific work, and yes, I concur. If you've not seen this, then why are you still listening to us talking about it? Go and watch it. Yes.
Yeah, I think some of the greatest directors don't have a sort of signature style in that way.
Yeah.
Some do. I don't think greatest directors, perhaps quite the phrase I would use, but like, look at a Hitchcock. But you know what a Hitchcock film is like.
Yeah, you know a Hitchcock film. You know a Spielberg film when you see it. I don't think I would necessarily be able to claim that I knew a Huston film.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think that's good, actually.
Yeah.
Tell me, I've said this before, Scott, but like, tell me, what's a Martin Scorsese film?
True. Yeah.
Like, I don't think you can. There are maybe occasional traits, and that's something to do with who he works with as well. Like some of the editing in Scorsese's films may have a bit of a trend to it. Particularly like the Goodfellas did, and what Thelma Schoonmaker did with like the music coming in just before the transition, that sort of thing, like the way it crosses over. Yeah. But for the most part, what's a Scorsese film? Because you're going to tell me that there's anything similar between Goodfellas and Silence? Or Kundun?
Yeah.
Right? There's not. So yeah, I think it's more like that, but they just to have a film this impactful, this good as your first film, and not be one of those people like had like one film in them and kind of disappeared. Yeah. It's just incredible. I was quite struck by the parallel of it being 1941, the year Citizen Kane came out.
Yes, a banner year.
So I mean, he wasn't changing the language of cinema, Huston, but he was still making a hell of an impactful movie at the time. Yeah. But yeah, it's just such a great film, like, and there's a lot of bits where, which is weird because it does not fit with the completely unnecessary text at the beginning, something I complained about in Key Largo as well. Yeah. But that it's trusting the audience quite a lot. There's a great scene, well, there are two great scenes that are sort of similar, where Humphrey Bogart is visiting Sidney Greenstreet's Gutman in these apartments, like his hotel room, whatever it is. Is it a hotel? It looks like one.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, but it's like a suite that looks like it could be a flat, you know? Yeah. And he's in there, and the first time, this isn't the point I'm making about the trusting the audience, but the first time when Bogey's in there, and he acts all offended and trashes the place, almost like he spits the cigar out, he throws the drink away, and like Sidney Greenstreet's thinking, oh, this guy's mad and stuff, and he walks out, and he's like, the moment the door closes like that, the anger drops and he's smirking to himself. It's so entertaining. But when he returns to the room later, and the idea of like the private detective being drugged, it's always in the offing in that genre film. Yeah. And, you know, Jackie Treehorn treats objects like women, man. You know, it's like it's become sort of like a trope during the years that, you know, so many other films have done that sort of thing. You know, it's nothing. But instead of it being like a less skilled director might just like have a close up of a glass or something like that. It's so much more subtle than that. Bogey Spade has already established in an earlier scene, that drinking isn't a problem to him, as Sidney Greenstreet says. I appreciate a man who doesn't say when. He knows that he doesn't have to watch himself under drink and stuff. So it suggests okay, they're setting up something with alcohol here. That's quite interesting. When he returns, he pours a massive measure for Spade. He doesn't touch it.
Yeah.
And Sidney Greenstreet keeps looking at the glass, but it's more looking like just a glance at the side of his eye. And there's no zoom into the glass. There's no cut to a close-up of the glass or anything like that. So you could quite easily miss it.
Yeah.
While he's, but then finally, when the conversation goes, and then Bogey picks up the glass, and a few minutes later he's knocked out. But it's there's real tension there. But it works just a scene its own. But then there's so much subtle stuff in there that when you watch it and you pay more attention. Oh yeah, it's look, he's trusting the audience. I like this. So yeah, it's a great. Sidney Greenstreet is such a great villain. He's so charismatic.
Yeah.
He would be a great Bond villain, I think. Up there, the really charismatic ones. There's a really kind of swagger to him, and then just the speech patterns they've given him, and keep on people serving stuff in a way, sort of oh yes, well played, sort of fine job, sort of that kind of thing. It's just I don't know, I really like it. And yeah, so it really stands up. Especially kind of in that genre, the lack of guns is really refreshing. And that's part of the character as well. He talks about not liking them. And he disarms people a couple of times. But, that's actually the hero isn't using guns.
Yeah. He's
using his wits instead, which is great. Yeah. And there's some, really funny moments as well too, because when Peter Lorre, and it's because I say that because it's quite a sort of grim and serious genre for the most part. But there are moments here, and there's simple bits of dialogue, when that little, he calls him a kid. God knows how old he actually was. I can't judge anybody in mid-20th century films at all. He's tailing Spade for Gutman, and it's he pulls the gun off and he goes, it's the cheaper the crook, the gaudier the patter. Lines like that. And then Bogey just laughing his head off, and me too, at the point where he disarmed Peter Lorre. Had a wee conversation with, seemingly come to an agreement. For some reason, gives Peter Lorre his gun back, and then he sticks him up a second time.
Yeah.
But the character's just laughing like mad because he thinks, oh yeah, that was dumb, but also I'll give a wee laugh to that, and I find that really funny. It's an absolute classic, and yes, you should definitely be watching that.
Yeah, there's not many films you get to the end of it, and there's not, even for picky bastards like us, there's not really anything you want to pick a flaw with. So yeah, can't really beat it. So
even sort of explaining the plot, which is effectively what he's doing away at the end, how he'd kind of sussed out the woman, the things she'd done wrong, how he'd suspect her, that sort of thing, or any of the things that are going on at the end there. I was it's not Deus Ex Machina. It's not knowledge this person couldn't have or something. It just makes sense. And if you think, then you sort of wind it back in your head, and it's there's nothing contradicted that in his behaviour, his language in the rest of the film.
Yeah.
Never committed to things, never actually said anything that would make that stupid.
Yeah.
I do like this film a great deal.